Age quickly. So I've heard a couple of different kinds of reactions from people who are trying to assess China's reaction to the Ukraine invasion. At one extreme, you have people saying, look, China loves this. Now the U.S. will be distracted. We'll have to devote more military resources to Europe, not only during the war, but for some time thereafter. So this will impede our pivot to Asia. China will have a freer hand in the Pacific and so on. Meanwhile, they'll get cheap commodities from Russia because nobody else is buying some of them, or fewer people are buying them. The other kind of reaction I've heard at the other extreme is, oh, this is very uncomfortable for China because they're kind of associated with this in a way. And part of the backdrop for that, of course, is that right at the beginning of the Winter Olympics, there was a high-profile appearance between Putin and Xi Jinping. They got together, kind of bonded, released a joint statement, which on the one hand, it didn't mention Ukraine, but it did call for an end to NATO expansion. It said that Russia and China had a friendship that was, quote, without limits or something like that. So the logic here is that China really doesn't want to be associated with a pretty plainly illegal invasion, and they don't want to be associated with all the publicity, all the atrocity and so on. So those are two different kinds of reactions. I've heard they're not really logically incompatible, that China is having a mixture of reactions, but I wanted to start off by asking what your take on this is.
Well, I would say the situation is complex, but overall, what's happened in Ukraine has been a major setback for China. And I'll give you at least 5 reasons. The first reason is that the Chinese, to sustain their growth and to become the number one economy in the world, just need global stability. This Ukraine event has been hugely disruptive, slowing down the global economy, shaking up everything. And the Chinese, because of their civilizational history, just hate chaos. There's a word for chaos in Chinese, luan, which they hate. That's reason number one. Number 2, their number one partner, even if it's not technically an ally, Russia, would have been better for China to have a strong Russia rather than a weak Russia. Now it's very clear that Russia is bleeding in Ukraine. Russia has been badly hurt, and the financial sanctions have been tremendously damaging to the Russian economy. So now China's number one partner, which used to be strong, has become seriously weakened. And the third reason is that, China has been trying very hard to deal with Europe and the United States as two independent poles, and trying very hard to avoid a strong, cohesive Western alliance working together against China. And by and large, that strategy with ups and downs has been quite successful, because the Europeans have their own interests with China and we're quite happy to have a slightly differentiated policy towards China from the United States of America. But now, the biggest result of this Ukraine invasion has been a re-galvanization of Western solidarity. And clearly, for a variety of reasons, the strategic interests and perspectives of United States and Europe have converged. And this convergence of strategic interests in the Western alliance is a setback for China too. And then, of course, fourthly, there is a rather triumphant mood in Washington, D.C. that says, hey, guess what? We did it. We really fixed the Russians. We cooked their goose. And now we are winning this war, right? And so instead of dealing with an uncertain, maybe even nervous Washington, D.C., China has to deal with a strong, confident United States after the Ukraine episode. And the fifth point I make, of course, is that from the Chinese point of view, the biggest shock, maybe a nuclear shock that they got, was the effectiveness of the economic sanctions on the Russian economy. And now they must be thinking, gosh, how did half the central bank reserves of the Russian central bank evaporate, boom, right, overnight? Now, if Russia's got 650 billion US dollars, China's got $3.2 trillion. Now, what happens if $1.6 trillion just gets seized and disappear? That's a big deal. So I'm sure there's a major strategic rethinking in China about the real meaning of this Ukraine episode. And I'm sure that they're not happy and they're not celebrating.